stated is that until we are sure that there will not be difficulties, the honorary sheriffs will not disappear.
Thanks. And that concludes portfolio questions, and we now move to the next item of business, which is a debate on motion number 9222 in the name of Alec Neil on an update on delivering the 2020 vision in NHS Scotland. I invite members who wish to speak in this debate to press the request to speak buttons now, and I call on Alec Neil to speak to and move the motion. Cabinet Secretary, you have 14 minutes.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Presiding Officer. I rise to move the motion in my name. This afternoon's debate provides the Parliament with an opportunity to positively focus on the key role that innovation and technology will play in delivering the 2020 vision for health and social care in Scotland. Our vision is that by 2020, everyone is able to live longer, healthier lives at home or in a homely setting. We need to enable the people of Scotland and their carers and families to use digital technologies to access the best possible quality health care, and that's good for patient safety. It promotes integration of health and social care. It hopefully will reduce the amount of unnecessary hospitalisation. It will help us proceed on 7-day working and achieve a whole range of other qualitative objectives in the National Health Service in Scotland. Of course.
David Stewart.
Take the Cabinet Secretary giving way. In the motion, the Cabinet Secretary has stressed the importance of innovation in technology. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that the Horizon 2020 European funding is designed to enhance innovation in health. Has the Cabinet Secretary had any direct involvement with that funding and to see if it can benefit Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Finance, John Matheson, has been very actively involved with the European Union in exploiting all financial opportunities for the National Health Service in Scotland and indeed the wider life sciences industrial sector to use European funds to promote research and development in a range of different ways, and we are making as much use of those programmes as we possibly can. Can I also say, Presiding Officer, that as I said in the previous debate, I am inviting the opposition spokespeople into a presentation in St Andrews House on the wider 2020 vision, and I hope to arrange that for early April, because I am very, very keen that the 2020 vision, as far as possible, can be done on a more consensual basis than perhaps some health debates have been in this Parliament in the past, and that other parties have the opportunity to input their ideas and their thoughts about where the National Health Service needs to be by 2020, and not just the National Health Service, but social care as well. Now, Scotland is recognised internationally as a country that has advanced medical science and leads in the field of information technology and informatics. And specifically in terms of health, we actually have 80 European leaders coming to Scotland next week to look at the use of innovation and technology in the National Health Service in Scotland, because we are recognised as a world leader in the application of much of that technology. And indeed, we also have fairly soon visitors from as far away as Peru coming to learn how we do it, with a view to learning lessons that are applicable in their own country. And I believe we need to grasp even more in future the opportunity that new technology gives us to deliver the step change we all want to see in the way that healthcare services can be accessed and delivered in Scotland. Now, let me begin by updating the Chamber on where we are now, because, as I've already said, the good news is that Scotland's well ahead of the game already. At a summit I hosted yesterday of digital health leaders from across Scotland, there was consensus that we had achieved much over the last 7 years under our e-health strategy, when investment has totalled over £770 million. But those digital health leaders agree with me that there is an opportunity to step up the pace of change and the scale of change, and to exploit significant investments made in our core infrastructure. So while we are ahead of the game, we need to ensure that we continue to focus our energies and support digital technologies to step up the pace of delivery for our 2020 priorities of person-centred, effective and high-quality, safe health and social care. Many members will be familiar with the reviews of national health technology programmes south of the border and on their astronomical costs, with little to show from much of that investment. That unsuccessful centralised and big bang approach has failed for many reasons, including a lack of collaboration with service providers and poor public consultation. The Scottish Government recognised the risks and struck a different course. We have taken a consultative approach with patients. We have made improvements based on clinical leadership and local innovation, and we have recognised that the technology is an enabler to achieving a 2020 vision and not an end in its own right. I want to highlight this afternoon some examples of where technology is already delivering for patients in Scotland and where I think we can do much more. In Renfrewshire, telecare support has meant that people with dementia have been able to stay in their own homes for 2 years longer than expected. It's also an effective use of resources. The Renfrewshire project has meant that £2.8 million has been ploughed back into frontline services. Local authorities have led the way in their use of technology to support people at home. Around 115,000 of our most vulnerable people in Scotland received telecare services last year. Early work in Dalmellington in East Ayrshire, Girvan in South Ayrshire and in parts of North Ayrshire has shown that telehealth has reduced emergency admissions by 70% and GP appointments by 26% for patients with chronic lung diseases. And there's more to come. Already over 8,000 people have been involved in the initial planning stage of Living It Up, our innovative £10 million partnership programme with the UK Technology Strategy Board. It uses familiar devices like televisions and smartphones to help people manage their own health and well-being at home. And I think we would all agree that self-management has a big role to play in the future delivery of health and social care. There's clearly a demand for all of these areas of work, but we want to do much more. And I want to see it all happen with a greater pace and greater scale across the health and social care sector in Scotland. I'm therefore pleased to confirm to the Chamber that an additional £10 million of funding will be provided to NHS boards to support the expansion of home health monitoring solutions across Scotland as part of an integrated care package. And this will help us deliver real results in telehealth and telecare over the next 2 years. And we must not forget the emerging technologies we're developing with partners to support future healthcare models. I was delighted when, thanks to a £10 million investment from the Scottish Funding Council, the Digital Health Institute was launched in October last year. This innovative partnership between healthcare providers, industry and academia will create the next generation of technology. I've outlined how patients in Scotland are already seeing benefits from digital technology, but they quite rightly expect more. In a world where technology allows us to access information at the touch of a button, we must also support people to electronically interact with their healthcare services. And today I can also confirm that I am setting the ambitious goal of creating a personalised electronic patient record for every patient in Scotland and every citizen in Scotland by 2020 at the latest. This will allow people to digitally access and jointly manage the health and care information that's important to them and their well-being. Involving people in co-producing the records ensures that complex clinical information is explained to the patient. This can bolster the relationship between patients and clinicians and promote patient empowerment. It will build upon a series of building blocks that we already have in place. The award-winning Key Information Summary, KISS for short, is an excellent example of clinicians and patients working together. It is now supporting more than 76,000 vulnerable people to live safe and secure lives. We need to develop an approach to handling information that keeps everyone informed, engaged and aware. And I've asked for clear and effective risk-based models to be developed to ensure that information flows through the system. Of course, some of our patients already have direct access to online records and advice to support greater interaction with their clinicians. Take the examples of My Diabetes My Way, supporting nearly 5,000 people with diabetes, and Renal Patient View, supporting over 4,000 people, which were developed by clinicians to support patients to live fully active lives in their own homes. In response to patient demands, technology systems within GP practices are now starting to offer online transactional services such as appointment bookings, repeat prescriptions and access to information including test results. This service needs to be available to everybody in Scotland as soon as possible. We need individuals to participate in their own health and care, designing solutions that fit their needs. I've highlighted how digital technology is delivering for patients. There is an element to this that may not be immediately visible to patients. That is about how technology will mean that the NHS in Scotland will be working smarter and more flexibly and more cost-effectively in the delivery of services. We have to recognise that new ways of working will be required, and there needs to be a big shift in embedded cultures and practices. These are tricky challenges to address, but through strong leadership and the commitment of a workforce that's already valued service improvement, we intend to meet these challenges head-on. We've already seen how technology advances supports effective service redesign. Take our tele-stroke service. This has led to a 151% increase in treatment rates for stroke thrombosis in boards. I've mentioned the commitment of our staff in the National Health Service in Scotland to this whole issue of core e-health. We need to support our workforce with the right information wherever they need it at the right time. Our e-health strategy has moved the health service from one that relied on paper to one where there is an efficient core infrastructure to support electronic records in place. To support integrated health and social care, we need to look beyond traditional healthcare settings. In 2012-13, we made an additional £1 million investment in mobile devices to support the community healthcare workforce. To truly shift the balance of care, we need to focus more resources in this area to develop and support integrated working. Another example of this is the use of apps, for example in the MSK service in Ayrshire, that is making a material difference to the quality and cost-effectiveness of delivery there. Our 2020 vision, Presiding Officer, also sees a more effective and safer health service in Scotland. All boards have adopted clinical portal technologies, which means relevant information can be assembled for the clinician from different IT systems at the point the information is needed. It provides a platform for future interactive online services and information. NHS Scotland now has the means of collecting more and richer clinical and performance information in real time. For example, in NHS Borders, I saw for myself, and Jim Hume, I think, saw this morning, the significant progress achieved through the electronic whiteboard solution that they have installed in all their wards, a solution developed by a Scottish company. And this has contributed to reduced lengths of stay, improved patient safety and reduced referral levels while ensuring operational consistency. I have provided £2 million to NHS boards this financial year alone to ensure that every board has similar capabilities in place, and my ambition is to have this in every ward, in every hospital in Scotland. Scotland benefits from good electronic communications between primary and secondary care, but we still need to bring together information from across primary, secondary and community care in a consistent electronic patient record. A major patient safety and efficiency initiative that is part of Prescriptions for Excellence is the introduction of what is known as HEPMA, Hospital Electronic Prescribing and Medicines Administration. From that will come the development of a shared virtual medications record. This has massive support from clinicians across Scotland who see it as the last major piece of clinical technology that is absent in acute care. Without it, an electronic patient record is not fully achievable, and this is an example of where significant investment in business change will deliver immense improvements in efficiency and patient safety. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, building on these examples to deliver at pace and scale will not be straightforward, but the 2020 vision, underpinned by the increased pace of innovation, gives us the route map to delivery and success. The rewards for patients in Scotland are immense, and I look forward to working with all the other parties in the Parliament to help deliver our vision for 2020 and beyond, and in that spirit I so move the motion.
Many thanks. I now call on Richard Simpson to speak to and move Amendment 9222.2. Mr Simpson, you have 10 minutes. Please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I wish to begin by declaring a family interest in the area of IT and e-health. My own recent experience of treatment is one which makes me very proud of the NHS in Scotland, proud of the shared vision of Scottish Labour and the SNP, and indeed other parties, of an NHS based on cooperation and collaboration and firmly embedded in the founding principles. The 2020 vision, which we are debating today, with its triple aims, 12 priorities and 24 key deliveries, is fine, and I very much welcome the Cabinet Secretary's offer to meet parties and have a briefing and update on the other key deliveries. But I have to say that the trenchant warnings from the King's Fund and from Audit Scotland, with its critical analysis, and that we need really quite a radical vision if we're going to be able to deliver these shared objectives. It is not going to be possible to follow, as one commentator has commented, business as usual. It is really not possible with the current financial restraints and the growth and demand. Although the government's motion is about, and the speech is all about e-health, we cannot ignore the serious pressures that there are on the NHS today. Now, for many years, telehealth and telecare have held out the hope of a revolution in self-management, monitoring and preventive care. And there is no doubt, as the Cabinet Secretary has said, that Scotland is in the forefront of development in this field, and this has been recognised in Europe. However, the delivery has, in my view, been overly dependent upon the signing up of individual health boards. And my speech, which will be critical, is really by way of a reality check, although I share the Cabinet Secretary's aspirations. The evidence for the benefits of telehealth and telecare is becoming clearer. Firstly, the positive effect on the well-being and confidence for patients, their families and carers. And secondly, the possibility of reduction in readmissions or unplanned emergency admissions for some disease-specific conditions, for example, cardiac failure. However, this is illustrative because at the very time when we're getting good monitoring systems in place, cardiac specialist nurses have been reduced or redeployed to general wards. And that means that the managed care network or the clinical pathway is damaged. The success of telehealth or telecare, as in other areas, is dependent on all parts of the managed care network or clinical pathway being effective. Now, the fact, for example, that chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, has not yet led to clear improvements in readmissions, except in small-scale projects such as the one the Cabinet Secretary mentioned, or the one in Argyll and Bute. This may be due to, not to a failure of telecare, but actually to a need for a redesign in the backup services, which emphasises the point that I'm trying to make about the managed care networks being critical. If we look at the use of telecare in hypertension, the monitoring is a very good example of empowering patients. It has been proven to improve medicine compliance, which in turn improves outcomes. So the messages I would like the government to take on board are to ensure, firstly, that there is a continuing strong research element to the developments. No pilot should be undertaken without an effective and proper audit of what is actually happening, and preferably some form of controlled or randomised controlled trial. Secondly, that where telehealth and telecare are shown to be effective, health boards should be required to implement, and this should be achieved through a rigorous inspection and monitoring system. The Audit Scotland review in 2013 showed a rather patchy response, except in the field of implementing video conferencing, which all 14 boards had adopted. Now, I very much welcome the launch in September, October last year of the Digital Health Institute. It is indeed a very ambitious project, with its aim to establish 120 innovative collaborations and release 140 products and services. I wish it well. Empowering patients, as the Cabinet Secretary has said, is essential for self-management, and this does mean access to things like the Key Information Summary across Scotland. And I want to add my congratulations to Dr Libby Morris and her team for their success as winners of the Excellence in Major Health Care IT Awards category at the eHealth Insider Awards in 2013. KISS and the Emergency Care Records system in Scotland are indeed a success story. Now, I want to turn, in the time that's left to me, to IT generally, and here I have to be more critical. This is another area in which promises much, but in Scotland is extremely fragmented. We have certainly avoided the massive implosion system that was so expensive in England, but we have had our own problems. The Cabinet Secretary, for example, didn't mention the failure of eCare after 5 years at a cost of £56 million. Then there is the needle exchange system, another national IT software, developed at the cost of £250,000. It's only used by one ADP in Scotland, as far as I'm aware. I have an area of personal interest as a previous clinician in our failure to develop a single shared assessment system for drugs and alcohol, which I called for in 2003 after stepping down, having been the minister in charge of that area. Now we have DAISY, and I would like the Minister, in summing up, possibly to give us an update on that progress. But that's 10 years later, and again it's a national system. Glasgow has tried to develop a system. I hope that it will be built on, and there are other measures around which I will perhaps tell the Cabinet Secretary of later. Now, we've undertaken a series of FOIs in the past 6 months, and this has demonstrated a number of disturbing features. Firstly, there's only one health board in Scotland, Fife, which has met the ISO standard for its IT. Another of our FOIs has shown not one, that is the Glasgow interruption of service, but 252 interruptions in IT services over 3 years. And it has shown 3 health boards, Highland, Dumfries and Galloway and Forth Valley, who couldn't even tell us whether there had been interruptions or not. This is not satisfactory. The recent collapse of the Glasgow IT system, with its potential for damaging clinical consequences, produced a first report that could not find a cause, and that was worrying, but it went on to recommend quite expensive remedial measures. How can that be done if you don't know actually what the cause of the original failure was? This is an area that crying out for HIS to undertake a formal inspection of the resilience of our IT systems across all the health boards in Scotland. Now, devolving most of the IT budgets to 14 different health boards, in my view, following the report by the now Chief Executive of Glasgow Health Board, was an abrogation of the central leadership necessary. It allows the growth of fragmented IT systems. It has meant there is no universal clinical access to data. So, for example, and this is from my recent experience, Tayside consultants cannot access laboratory results for patients in Fife, of whom they see quite a number. In my own case, my consultant in the Beatson couldn't access the laboratory results undertaken by a GP in Fife. The clinical portal system, started in 2019, is only just in place after 5 years and are not accessible across managed care networks, or only accessible in a cumbersome way in which clinicians have to come out of one system and go back into another, and they tell me this is very cumbersome. Our only major success, which I would not criticise at all, has been the radiology system, which is absolutely world-class. I think younger health professionals must be absolutely horrified, as I am, by our failure to adopt digital solutions. They use iPads, iPhones or the equivalent extensively, and yet they are back to pencil and paper in the wards. I saw vast paper records in the wards in which I was present. There is a lack of a prospective system for ensuring patient confidentiality in the hospital IT systems. This is, I believe, in breach of the EU legal case, I versus Finland, and is worrying. We had another FOI which looked at the inappropriate access to electronic data. And this showed that Lothian, which is the only health board that has had a system in place since 2011, albeit a retrospective one, was reporting 794 breaches in 2 years. But at least they have a system and they're showing a reduction. The other boards either don't have systems or are reporting unbelievable results. Glasgow, 10 breaches. Fife reported a rising trend. Dumfries and Galloway, which only started in April, has recorded 23 in 6 months. But I have no confidence, Cabinet Secretary, in the other board's protection of patient data. Now, the last Cabinet Secretary made a promise to me in this chamber that patients by 2015 would have access to an audit trail of all those who were looking at their clinical data. And I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would update us on that promise. This is an area the government must get a grip on, or it could endanger the excellent Spire data sharing project, which is much better positioned than the data sharing project in England. Deputy Presiding Officer, sorry, I didn't notice you'd changed, Madam. As our amendment says, the first step in delivering the 2020 vision will be to identify the pressures on the system, and colleagues will expand on some of these concerns. On the workforce issues, which we've discussed elsewhere, which have changed with cuts in trainees and then re-establishing them, with cuts in nurses and then re-establishing. Challenge of the waiting time targets, many are finding difficulty to be met. The delayed discharge target, which has not been met in 16 out of the last 20 quarters. The shifting of balancing care, not evidenced in the Audit Scotland report, whose also critique in this shaping the care of older people is devastating. The reality evidenced repeatedly by Audit Scotland that the situation is not sustainable. We need to be proactive, not reactive. I will end, Deputy Presiding Officer, by saying that I welcome the aspirations of the Cabinet Secretary. There is a lot to do, but I move the amendment in my name.
Thank you very much. I now call on Jim Hume to speak to and move Amendment 9222.1. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I welcome this debate this afternoon. I'll start off by moving the amendment in my name, in case I forget at the end. I did have the privilege of experiencing the good work that our NHS do. It was on Friday past, not Monday, but this morning, I should say, down at the Borders General Hospital. I spent some time in the stroke unit there, intensive care unit, mental health facility at Huntlyburn, and also witnessed the innovative ward view system that is in place there and being further developed. The concept is simple enough, but the potential is absolutely mind-boggling. Basically, it's more than a replacement for the squiggles on a whiteboard. The huge touchscreen display gives you an instant view of exactly all the patients in the ward. You can instantly see who needs what medicine and when patients will be discharged, and ensure that the discharge letter is prepared in time. It's a powerful tool for clinicians during their huddle to make sure they are focusing their efforts where they are best needed. And because ward view is the same for all wards, then all the icons and setup are familiar to all NHS staff in that area, no matter which ward they are seconded to. And of course the information is portable, with the likelihood that it will be more portable in the near future with the use of tablets and smartphones. Patient status, as the Cabinet Secretary said, can be updated live. So gone the days will be of the doctor and nurse finding time to handwrite their notes, perhaps sometimes after the event. So I'm pleased to hear the Minister say that they're going to spread the use of ward view out to health board regions across Scotland. Not just in wards, though, I think is important. This can be used right to a health visitor, as I'll come to later on in the speech. The innovative system can ensure that when a patient is transferred, their details are all on the display straight away. So there's no need for deciphering doctors' notes or nurses, I should say, fine handwriting. But the power comes from the ability for the system to work throughout cyberspace, in fact. In the Borders, they're implementing the systems into community hospitals. Therefore, a consultant can monitor and possibly diagnose from a distance, remotely, virtually. and it can go further, implement the system to pharmacies, and that can help with patients leaving hospitals, integrate with transport and ambulances, and you can ensure safe and timely discharge, and incoming patients' information can be with the hospital before the patient is even there. It can even be used for catering. When a patient's moved from one ward to another, then their dinner cannot be guaranteed to follow them, believe it or not. And often patients either miss out completely on food due to a move between wards, or end up with getting 2 servings, and therefore a waste in the system. As I said, the potential is mind-boggling. Are we seeing hospitals without walls, virtual hospitals? I'm sure we shall still need walled hospitals and community hospitals, but this innovation must lead to better care. More cared for where they want to be cared for, an ability for staff to manage their wards and hospitals better, get an immediate picture of where they are, retargets, where they are, rebeds that are available, and most importantly, ensure that patients are getting their person-centred care that they deserve and we want them to get. Obviously, this example will evolve, and we may not recognise it in years to come, but I am convinced that's the future. A future of better care, of integrated care, that will see more and more staying in their homes and communities. It's a valuable tool to integrate our health and social care seamlessly, as the Cabinet Secretary has already hinted. I therefore support the Cabinet Secretary with this programme in looking to roll it out over all of Scotland in some form, but it must be in a uniform form. Richard Simpson's quite right. As we all know, patients' health doesn't know boundaries, and many patients have to move from health board area to health board area. I think that this is a matter of urgency, hence my amendment. Having witnessed what real innovation can do, I believe we should establish a heat target for health boards to mainstream telehealth care, and that's part of my amendment. I believe Health Ward View can help to deliver that. It does tick the 3 domains of the route map perfectly: quality of care, health of the population, and value with financial sustainability. I'm sure that Ward View is not the only tool we can use, and the Minister's Cabinet Secretary has mentioned a few. Use of telehealth with doctors from the other side of the world could be of use in the middle of our nights. As we all know, trying to get doctors to cover out of our service here in Scotland is proving very difficult, so why not use a doctor in New Zealand, for example, in the middle of their day? Essential to this type of delivery, of course, will depend on good, fast broadband. Therefore, the focus to spread faster broadband throughout Scotland must be continued, but that's maybe a debate for another day. But I think we can progress now. We don't have to wait on faster broadband. So let's hope that we can realise our 2020 vision long before 2020, as the technology is here, so let's get it out there. I do welcome today's government motion. I think it can be strengthened by my amendment, which recognises how beneficial the likes of Ward View already is for our health service, what potential it has to develop into an even more powerful tool, and I believe that setting targets, and I on purpose haven't stated what the target should be, that's for the experts, but a target will certainly focus the health boards on mainstreaming the use of telehealth, and we can hope to see Scotland leading the way with innovative solutions which will undoubtedly lead to better health care for our patients.
Many thanks. I now call on Nanette Millen. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. At the outset, let me say that my party welcomes this debate to bring us up to speed with the growing contribution made by technology to the delivery of the Scottish Government's 2020 vision for NHS Scotland, and we will be supporting the motion at decision time. I cut my medical teeth at Aberdeen University on the pioneering work of Professor Nelson Norman, at that time a senior lecturer in surgery, in developing remote health care, which would soon be used for the benefit of people employed in the growing oil and gas industry in the North Sea. And I think it's particularly appropriate that the first director of the recently established Digital Health Institute, Professor George Crooks, is also a graduate of that university and a former experienced practitioner at the coalface of primary care in the same city. Set up with a specific remit to promote innovation through the use of technology in supporting people to live longer, healthier lives at home or in a homely setting, and as a result generate economic benefit for Scotland as a leader in the growing global digital healthcare market. The collaborative work of DHI will position it well to assist the delivery by health boards, local authorities and the third sector of the outcomes envisaged in the 2020 vision for NHS Scotland. It's open to anyone with an interest in digital health and improving technologies in Scotland and beyond, and there's significant interest in the business community, particularly amongst the small business digital health community. In the briefing sent to us by the Institute, there are already exciting new developments in the pipeline, one being the assessment of new technologies to allow for easier identification and earlier treatment of patients with atrial fibrillation, a common cause of heart failure and stroke in the elderly. To be able to record on a smartphone an ECG which can then be interpreted remotely has enormous potential for reducing unnecessary hospital admissions and for allowing patients to self-monitor their condition, which would be both reassuring for the patients and would allow GPs to better tailor their care for patients' individual needs. Such developments will clearly have a major impact on the patient health journeys, especially for those who live in the more remote and rural parts of the country, by allowing earlier diagnosis and triage well out with the acute healthcare setting, and enabling those who really don't need admission to be cared for in the community, and those who need it having speedy access to the specialist facilities their condition requires. Presiding Officer, there are many exciting possibilities ahead, and I look forward to hearing a lot more about innovative healthcare resulting from the collaborative work of the DHI. I also welcome the Cabinet Secretary's announcement today of financial support for health boards to expand home health monitoring programmes, and his proposal for the universal availability of personalised electronic patient records by 2020 at the latest. I could have done with this myself when I turned up recently for a rescheduled appointment for pre-op assessment, when I hadn't been told the venue had changed and my notes were in a different hospital, resulting in my appointment having to be rescheduled again, even though the nurse was free to see me because another patient hadn't turned up, but of course couldn't without my records. So electronic records would have been very useful. There are already a number of very successful uses of technology in healthcare, as we've already heard, such as the monitoring and management of long-term conditions like chronic heart failure and COPD, in dermatology where skin lesions can be diagnosed remotely by a dermatologist, or in endoscopy assessed by a consultant via video conferencing equipment, and many traumatic injuries can be assessed remotely by the same means. All this saves unnecessary journeys to hospital for patients and is an efficient use of specialist time, cutting back on time spent travelling to remote and island communities. Patients are happy and staff, by and large, are happy. I must also mention the excellent work being done by many optometrists in Scotland, whose digital retinal screening of patients is picking up many health problems early, at a time when they can be managed effectively. And I would urge everyone, but particularly those in older age groups, to attend regularly for the free eye health checks available to them. These could save them a great deal of grief in the future and help them to live safely and independently in their homes and communities well into old age. But it is taking a long time for telehealth and telecare to catch on in some rural areas, especially when you consider that some of this technology was available in the 1960s. However, with the enormous and increasing demands being placed on the NHS today, further innovation through technology will be vital if the 2020 vision for health and social care is to be achieved, and if the integration of health and social care is really going to achieve the best outcome for patients, with everyone involved in care planning, including patients and carers, having meaningful input into the patient journey. There's a long way to go, with delayed discharges on the way up again in my area due to difficulty in recruiting home carers because of the lure of the oil and gas industry, with severe pressure on acute hospital beds, and with patients complaining that they have to wait unreasonable lengths of time to see a GP. I can honestly say that in my 10 years as an MSP, I've never had so many disgruntled patients in touch with me as I have in the last 2 or 3 months. The RCN sums up the situation well in its briefing, where it says, and I quote, "Whilst the 2020 vision for our NHS is a very positive plan for patient care, the pressures on our NHS have become more intense since its launch in 2011. New policy directions, such as the integration of health and social care, 7-day working and unscheduled care, to name but a few, on top of day-to-day activity to meet targets and standards, mean that decision makers in our health boards are being pulled in too many directions. So now is a good time, they say, for politicians, the NHS and local authorities to have a renewed focus on the 2020 vision to ensure it becomes a reality." Presiding Officer, technology is clearly a key factor in achieving that reality, but only in conjunction with dealing with the existing pressures working against that achievement. I support the Scottish Government in its pursuit of innovation to achieve high-quality, patient-centred care, but urge it not to lose sight of the growing pressures on the NHS which are threatening this achievement. I'm not convinced that Labour's demand for an independent review of the service is necessary, which is why we will not be supporting their amendment, but they are right to draw attention to the problems currently facing the NHS in Scotland. We will be supporting the amendment in the name of Jim Hume, and I look forward to further updates on the 2020 vision in the months ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now turn to the open debate. Speeches of 6 minutes, please. Members who are hoping to be called should press the request to speak buttons now, please. And I call on Aileen MacLeod to be followed by Malcolm Chisholm. We are quite tight for time.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I want to start by welcoming the Cabinet Secretary's announcement of additional funding for NHS boards to support the expansion of home health monitoring solutions and the goal of a personalised patient record for every Scottish citizen by 2020. And digital health technologies provide us with the opportunity to radically change the way healthcare is delivered and accessed. It is already significantly improving the quality of healthcare for our elderly and vulnerable by adopting person-centred delivery systems, and the potential for future development is virtually unlimited. The importance of digital health technologies cannot be underestimated in enabling patients to be more in control of their own care, paving the way not only for better healthcare, but for a more financially sustainable model of healthcare. Now, harnessing the potential of digital health will give us a key enabling tool for delivering the 2020 vision, where everyone is able to live longer, healthier lives at home or in a homely setting. Now, for example, NHS Office in Galloway is piloting a number of telehealth projects, including the use of regular diabetes telemedicine clinics at the Galloway Community Hospital in Stranraer, which are linked in with specialist diabetes services 70 miles away at the DGRI in Dumfries. Now, while these pilots are very good, they do tend to be small scale, and if we are to seriously address the societal challenges that our health and care systems face, we do need to upscale our current efforts through the deployment of safe, effective and evidence-based solutions serving the needs of all of our citizens. Now, achieving the aims, Presiding Officer, of the Public Bodies Bill that was passed last week by the Parliament, it will require our local health and social care partnerships to deliver digital health care at scales larger than a single site or single service. That will need financial investment to assist the development of new capacities and ensure that Scotland remains at the forefront of European and global research and development in digital health. And the launch last October of the Digital Health Institute and its use of experience labs to let companies and academics work quickly with practitioners on the ground to test new solutions and develop towards commercial exploitation is, I believe, a significant step in the right direction. Now, currently, Presiding Officer, Scotland is in pole position to exploit its world-leading digi-health technology. We are already recognised as a world leader in developments in this area, and by exploiting our expertise in digital health, we will not only deliver significant benefits to those reliant on health and social care and address the twin challenges of demographic change and public spending constraints, but we will also create a significant economic opportunity. So Scotland is therefore ideally placed to make a significant contribution to what is one of the major challenges facing European society today. Now, the European Commission has identified healthy and active ageing and digital health solutions as a key priority in its Europe 2020 growth agenda. And this is highlighted in a number of initiatives, for example, the new EU Health Programme 2014 to 2020, the e-Health Action Plan, the European Innovation Partnership on Active and Healthy Ageing, which already has significant Scottish participation, the forthcoming mHealth Green Paper for mobile devices, and the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Funding Programme. So there is very clear recognition within the EU of the potential of the digital health sector as a key driver for economic growth and the creation of jobs. And all of this links particularly well with achieving the Scottish Government's 2020 vision. Now, Presiding Officer, Scotland has a massive opportunity to take its world-leading digital health technology to the next level through the international consortium bid that is being led by Edinburgh University to establish a European Institute of Innovation and Technology, Knowledge and Innovation Community in the area of healthy living and active ageing, which, if successful, will be financed from the new EU Horizon 2020 funding programme. Now, Life KIC, as the Scottish-led KIC is called, will focus on developing new digital health technology through telehealth and telecare initiatives that, when implemented, will allow EU citizens to lead healthy, active and independent lives while ageing, as well as through new models of health and social care integration. So it will build on the excellence that we already have in Scotland in research and innovation. Now, the call for new KIC proposals was published on the 14th of February, and Professors Mark Parsons and Stuart Anderson of Edinburgh University have been working tirelessly with the support of the Digital Health Institute, along with others such as Scotland Europa, Scottish Enterprise, the Scottish Government and Professor George Crooks, the Medical Director of NHS 24, to build a Team Scotland approach and to bring in other partners in Denmark, Spain, Italy, Germany and the City of Amsterdam to act as collection nodes within the Life KIC. Now, if successful, the Scottish-UK part of the Life KIC will be hosted in Edinburgh and the overall KIC will be headquartered in Edinburgh. This will enable the university to participate as an innovation hub, which is about creating centres of excellence that integrate higher education, research and business activities. Now, given Scotland really is on the cusp of the development of world-leading technology in this area, it is so important for this Parliament to give its full support to the Life KIC bid, and I would also very much welcome the support of the Cabinet Secretary and ask that everything that can be done is done to ensure there is also support from the UK Government in taking the bid forward in Brussels. So, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, digital health has the potential to improve health performance and patient experience in Scotland, and to do so in a cost-effective manner. This is an economic prize that is worth pursuing, and I am delighted the Scottish Government is approaching that challenge with such commitment.
Thank you very much. I now call Malcolm Chisholm to be followed by Stuart Stevenson.
Presiding Officer, I have never been very knowledgeable about e-health, but I have been aware of its importance for a long time, which was why I did actually chair the e-health strategy board when I was the Minister, and I was very pleased that the David Kerr report made its recommendations on IT fairly central. And, for example, it recommended common IT system for NHS Scotland, a telehealth technology resource centre and an electronic health record for all. Now, I was very pleased, obviously, like others, to hear the Cabinet Secretary announce the personalised electronic health record by 2020, but I wonder if that will be owned by the patient, because that was a very interesting recommendation from the great English GP Sir John Oldham, who produced an important report for the Labour Party in England yesterday. So perhaps, I'm always asking the Cabinet Secretary to look at health in England, although he knows I don't support the health system in England. Now, we could actually, I could, as others, spend the whole of the debate giving examples of progress since the Kerr report in 2005. So let's just touch upon that briefly, but always remembering what Richard Simpson said, that this is not a substitute for all the other things that have to be done. But obviously we've had the development of video conferencing. I remember seeing A&E at Aberdeen 10 years ago, but now that's become more extensive, and, for example, some people are getting speech and language therapy by video conferences. There's the monitoring that's been referred to in relation to diabetes by Aileen MacLeod, and that goes to other conditions as well, such as cardiac problems. We've got telecare services at home, and again, even 10 years ago, I was seeing that in houses in West Lothian where the movements of residents, of older residents, were being monitored remotely. There's the electronic whiteboards that Jim Hume mentioned, although Richard Simpson reminded us that they're not to be seen everywhere. There's rehabilitation, for example, remote pulmonary rehabilitation at several sites in Scotland. And stroke thrombolysis, which is what the Cabinet Secretary referred to, although I know it's only in 11 out of 14 health boards, so again Richard Simpson's point stands about making that apply everywhere, but that means that it's possible to have access to an immediate stroke specialist wherever in Scotland you happen to have a stroke. So lots of great examples, much of it based on smartphones and other handheld devices, often involving apps. And Aileen MacLeod, who is of course the expert in the Chamber and further afield on matters European, reminded us of all these European developments, and that includes a European consultation being launched this month on health apps. And that's really interesting, because there are really many good examples of that. One, for example, was developed by Leslie Holsworth, one of the great clinicians who was a member of the Kerr report, and she and others developed one for musculoskeletal problems. And by the way, if you want to find out more about the European consultation on health apps, look to Leslie Holdsworth Twitter site for yesterday, where you get a wonderful video by the Commission Vice President Neelie Kroes, who explains what this consultation is all about. And it's really interesting because they're interested in making sure these are accessible to people across Europe and wherever you travel in Europe, and they're interested obviously in quality and safety and the development of that. So that's a really interesting development. Now, this actually came up as well at the Eating Disorder Conference last week, and this is quite interesting. There's 231 million people in the world who have health and fitness apps, but we just have to think about the potential negatives of some of this, because some of the attendants at the conference on Friday, including the outstanding clinician Dr. Jane Morris from Aberdeen, did express some reservations because conditions such as anorexia nervosa could be made worse by a health and fitness app unless it was programmed sensitively to cover the obsessional nature of that and similar conditions. So I think that's just a cautionary note. These are positive, but they are potentially negative as well. And of course there are sceptics out there. I was pleased to hear Richard Simpson say, and so I always listen to his medical advice, that this is well evidenced, but I did notice in the material for debates today an article in the BMJ which was basically coming to the conclusion that there wasn't a lot of evidence in the particular sites that they examined. So I think that view is being overruled by the positive examples that are coming, but I suppose we have to convince the sceptics around this. So clinical trials are really important, and there's an excellent example of that, and this again features another member of the CARE report group, another outstanding clinician, Nora Kearney, who last week launched the Advanced Symptom Management System, and I'll just say briefly about that. It allows patients to report the side effects from their chemotherapy via a mobile phone. The information is immediately sent securely to a computer which assesses their symptoms and triggers alerts to doctors or nurses within minutes if they require specialist intervention. So she's the chief investigator of what is a pan-European study, and there's going to be randomised controlled trials at 17 sites in Europe. Unfortunately, she has just recently migrated to the University of Surrey, but we should pay tribute to the enormous contribution she's made to health in Scotland over the last 30 years. But the reason I'm mentioning it is that clinical trials are important, but also, crucially, this will lead, I believe, and she believes, and she knows a lot better than I or anybody else in this chamber, that it will lead to great developments in terms of personalised, in her case, cancer care, but I think in terms of person-centred care more generally, this technology has a great deal of potential. So I'm sure we should be absolutely positive about it, and we should welcome the announcements that are made today, but we should certainly remember the caveats made by Dr. Richard Simpson.
Many thanks. I now call Stuart Stevenson to be followed by Hugh Henry.
Presiding officer, I started my employment in computers in the 1960s. I've spent an awful lot of money on technology over the years, but I come to this debate not as an evangelist, but as an iconoclast, and I'm going to disagree with a vast amount of what's been said, but hopefully in a constructive way. Let me suggest, as I suspect others will agree, that let's imagine a person. My person is Shona. She lives in a remote rural location. She's well stricken in years, a bit overweight, and she has a sedentary lifestyle, and she's had a heart attack. Now, if Shona was near a hospital, she might get treatment in one way. She isn't. So if we can create the kind of connections between her and medical advisors that will help her, that's great. The telephone was first demonstrated in 1876, and today we can use that same piece of copper wire that might have been into our house for 100 years to do so much more, using the internet, using technologies, using Skype perhaps, which costs nothing, builds on the infrastructure to connect to people who can help her. And that's great. We have a specialist in New Zealand, as has been suggested. I think that's a little extreme, but somewhere in a specialist hospital in Scotland or elsewhere is able to talk to her and talk through her experience. That's likely to be helpful to her and cost-effective for the health service. But the specialist needs access to her medication, her previous medical history, her reaction to drugs she may have had, both positive and negative, so that he can give good advice. Now, of course, I'm just a simple soul. I get the Lloyd George out of the cabinet and just scan it in. Not interpret it, convert it, just give an image, so that it doesn't matter where it is. If next time we go to the wrong hospital, you can still read it. I would do very, very simple things. Just forget all this techie, complicated stuff. Now, Shona needs a little bit of technology, and that's probably something she can manage if she's got some way of recording what she's eating, the exercise she's taking, and she's getting advice coming back to her on the basis of what she puts in that helps her move to a more healthy lifestyle. That's going to be very good, and that's the kind of technology it's worth investing in. But of course, Shona may live in her remote rural location without broadband. Plenty of places in Scotland don't have broadband, but you can even get satellite broadband now to 999 houses out of 1,000 can get it for £35 a month. It costs 70 quid to put somebody in a treadmill to test their cardiac response and their breathing. So it actually could be well worth the health service just putting the satellite connection in. Talk to the Enterprise Minister, get some money out of her budget and just do it. Now, of course, many treatments are very, very cheap, but even to send a GP to the door of Shona for a single visit is probably a couple of months of broadband connection. So just do it, just be very, very simple. Now, Shona, if she gets good advice, she'll eat better, she'll take more exercise, and she'll get a bit fitter. But she'll also feel involved in the management of her condition. Because at the end of the day, that is the most important thing of all. Now, we do need at the health service end some of the big technology and infrastructure that makes it work. We've had reference to the disaster of the NHS communications network down south. 20 years ago, we had a huge disaster on the London ambulance service when they tried to put radio location in it. Just absolutely, it made things worse and not better. So the bottom line is, if you contract a company to deliver technology, don't be surprised if they deliver technology. What you actually need to do is contract companies to deliver health benefits, and only pay them if they do. If you're going to have a project, it must be a multi-phase project, because as you develop projects, the specification changes. And actually, if it doesn't change, then the people who are using it have disengaged from the project, because as you engage in a project, you learn more, you change your view of what you need. So you always have to have a phase 2 that you put all the change in. You accept no change in phase 1 unless you displace something from phase 1 to phase 2. The one thing you must do in projects, their time, their effort, and what delivered. Fix the time, and everything else will work in. And if it means taking function out to fix the time as you go along, then do so. Put it into the second part of the project. Now, innovation. Innovation and failure are necessary bedfellows. Because when we innovate, we're doing something we haven't done before. We can't be certain of outcomes. So let's stop being afraid of failure. And let's not go for the uniform solution at the outset. If we're innovating, let's do innovation small scale so we can fix it, detect failure, and limit the damage. We'll get to the point of deploying it big scale later. And let's avoid ISO standards like the plague. They reflect yesterday's needs and constrain the future innovation. Don't do it. They're about processes. They're not about outcomes. Presiding Officer, just let me end by saying what Shona wants us to do is have project managers for our IT projects that get a modest wage for turning up and only get paid when the health benefits are delivered. And let Shona decide if they have been. Presiding Officer.
Many thanks. I now call Hugh Henry to be followed by Chick Brodie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. When we talk about the health service in this Parliament, it's actually one of the few areas in broader public policy where actually most people agree with the fundamentals. Irrespective of party colours, everyone in this chamber is committed to a public health service that delivers for all of our constituents and for all of Scotland. And therefore, where we have such commitment right across the political spectrum, it actually gives us an opportunity to look at things in a totally different way. Yes, come election time, we will all have our disagreements about what policies might be better and what voters might want to hear. But in between those elections, surely it's not beyond us to actually take a step back and consider what can be done to improve matters. And I thought Stuart Stevenson's contribution was first class, because not only did he reflect on some of the issues about how you deliver, he actually gave some warnings about what might or might not be achievable and the consequences of not preparing and not delivering properly. And I thought that the key thing that he said there was about innovation and failure going together. And that brings me back to the politics, and particularly when we're looking at the use of technology to try to improve patient care. Because if we get obsessed with the politics, if we get obsessed with everything that we have to say between now and September has got to be predicated in a referendum, and then thereafter everything's predicated on 2016 and who wins, then we will never move forward. And if Stuart Stevenson's words are to have any effect, then it means that we need to be prepared to take the risks, to try things out, not in a haphazard way, not in a cavalier way, but in a considered and thoughtful fashion, in order to make sure that when we do decide to move forward, we're doing so for the best of reasons. And because I think there's political consensus, then it cannot be beyond our collective wit to be able to say, for something like this, let's put aside our differences and consider what is the best for the public and what is the best for the patients across Scotland. And that's why the call from Richard Simpson and his amendment, which has previously been articulated, is important. Because the question of review is not about Labour trying to score points over the SNP or trying to win the argument as far as voters are concerned in order to win elections. Taking it out of the political framework is about having a considered, thoughtful and objective approach that we can all sign up to, that we can all put our differences aside and say what is possible and what might not be possible, and by all means put your own political slant onto it at the end. Because, you know, there's a couple of things that have been said in the course of the debate that made me ponder. And, you know, I welcome some of the positive contributions that the Cabinet Secretary has referred to about extra money for different services. And, of course, you know, that does get politicians good headlines and press releases, and, you know, it goes down well when you're talking to the public. But it's when we reflect on what that actually means for the individual patient that it's the key to whether or not the innovations and the improvements in telecare or anything else are making a difference. So, for example, the £10 million, I'll take the technology project that the Cabinet Secretary referred to in Renfrewshire for people with dementia. I'll put a personal slant onto that. My wife and I are having to support elderly relatives in Renfrewshire who have dementia. And we haven't seen any evidence of that. And what we are seeing on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis is a difficulty in the home care services actually coping with the demands, not just from our relatives, but from other people. And therefore, if that welcome innovation is to have any effect and any impact locally, then it's people like the ones that I know who've got dementia that have got to see what does that actually mean to their quality of life, and how does it help us as a family to cope with their demands. And we also see, you know, you mentioned about the £10 million extra for home health monitoring solutions. What we see, and again, this is not a criticism of the Council, it's a fact about the pressures that they are under. We see home helps who are run ragged, who are coming in quickly, doing their job and then getting out quickly. And particularly when you're dealing with people with dementia, they need more to that than what's on offer. So, by all means, Cabinet Secretary, praise and shout to the rafters about the extra money and the innovations. But unless you heed Stuart Stevenson's warning about being prepared to fail by trying out something new, unless we're prepared to put our political differences aside to look at what's best for the NHS in Scotland, then we will continue to try to score political points off each other, right the way through from election to election, and we will not move forward in the way that is possible. And while there have been improvements in the health service, I think everything you spoke about today suggests that we could do better. And that's why I think that at some point, surely, we can put all that political point scoring aside, have a review, look at it independently, and try to sign up to do what's best for our patients, for our constituents and for the health service in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Chick Brodie to be followed by Mark MacDonald.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm delighted to be allowed to speak in the debate this afternoon, because I believe the NHS in Scotland is on a journey, a positive, exciting journey, and may I say how much I support the approach that Hugh Henry made, and indeed prior to him the comments that Stuart Stevenson made. Not all that long ago, we can recall, at least some of us can, the requirement to hold patient and or medical details in folders, in files, in documents, etc., and remembering authorisations requiring multiple signatories, patient data created at or with time gaps, completed on different media types, to be reviewed and then passed along to the next person in the medical cycle, be it a porter, nurse, doctor, consultant, and whoever, each with a different frame of reference on the patient's activity, health, safety or welfare, a lot of it mitigating against meaningful patient benefit. Today we've moved on, embracing many new technologies in radiology, as Richard Simpson mentioned, and many others, and in the use of new data analysis and collection techniques and communications. Deputy Presiding Officer, Scotland has always had a reputation, a pioneering reputation for medical research and, as people said, innovation. That reputation was and still is international. But to be complacent would be quite wrong. That reputation has to be enhanced, to be in the van, and that recognition has to be one of the foundation stones as we build on the constancy of change that our society and health provision and service demand. We have the innovation, we have the research capability within our universities and hospitals, we have the provision and results of educational research, and we have a robust life sciences industry. Above all, Deputy Presiding Officer, we have a skilled and professional health service team. What we need is the harnessing, going forward, of all of these and the connectivity of them through this period of significant change to create the world-leading health service and also, I believe, an exportable health service for the 21st century that I believe we can actually produce. Deputy Presiding Officer, at a time when President Obama is talking of spending $12 billion on an EMR programme, an electronic medical records programme, one important step indeed for the USA, Scotland, which has spent an average investment of £110 million a year, but nearly £800 million over the last 7 years, has already made some major steps. But there are many challenges we still face to see and grasp our vision for 2020. And as we face the challenges of demography and finance, we are in a good place, I think, to start that process. We are in a good place through recent progress in improving quality. And is it perfect yet? Of course it's not. There are still many challenges, but we all should embrace that successive Scottish governments have shared an inherent compassion and capacity to succour the need to look after our sick and elderly, and all of these governments should be applauded for that. So I say to all across the chamber, this community, this health caring, is a cord that I believe binds us all. At least I hope it binds us all. I don't believe there is one in this chamber, maybe some, that is not committed to the values of a publicly provided national health service. Not one who does not wish to see our patients, our customers, our clients, our family, friends, our neighbours, at the very heart of this service. And I said, yes, we still face challenges. We face a radical future change in healthcare provision. We face a financial challenge. We face a demographic challenge. But, Deputy Presiding Officer, with your indulgence, let me just focus on two specific situations. In East Ayrshire Council, a very progressive council in my mind, has, as part of its tripartite transformation strategy, what we call the Dalmellington Project, as part of its strategic imperatives to consider how best we can support older people to live more independently in the community. And there are many key actions in the strategic priorities report, working with the third sector, a very important sector, working with the third sector to allow older people to participate in and contribute to the community. But of the many also is the determination to implement a support for older people to live not just in the community but in their own home. That dovetails with the plan of the NHS in Ayrshire and Arn, as recognised by the Scottish Government, Scottish Centre for Telehealth and Telecare, and the Scottish Government, to lead on projects that will allow the communication directly into the homes of the elderly, to allow monitoring through a range of services, of connected technologies, of a person's health, so that we can secure their well-being, all remotely connected to a response centre. Deputy Presiding Officer, finally, no matter how good the digital and interconnectivity network is, it ultimately depends on people, on professionals in the health service. Patient safety, efficiency, care, both integrated and direct, all depend on teamwork, on openness, transparency, participation without fear or favour, of performance appraisal at all levels. That means change built on continuous improvement, founded on outcomes rather than targets, constructed on a programme of continuous training and education so that we have the right skills in the right place, married to the single and correct data provided at the right time and at the right place. That means strong leadership to drive that change in the NHS that will see a professional, technology-driven, unified and interconnected health service that puts the patient's well-being, their health and their safety at the heart of its purpose.
Thank you very much. I must now ask members if they could please stick to their 6 minutes. Mark MacDonald, to be followed by Duncan McNeill.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I think the 2020 vision is an acceptance of the evolution of healthcare and the need to make use of available technology to facilitate a greater sense of personal independence for the patient. And I think the sort of principles that lie behind the 2020 vision around the integration agenda, which I'll come back to, but also ensuring that the focus is on ensuring people get back into their home or community environment as soon as appropriate with a minimal risk of readmission. I think a key part to that is ensuring that where people are returning home, that appropriate care packages are put in place. Now, Nanette Milne highlighted the difficulties that exist in Aberdeen, where we are both representatives, and highlighted the difficulties that are created there. And indeed, my casework contains many examples of individuals who have either been delayed in hospital or in a care home setting because of an inability of the local authority to put in place a care package which will allow them to return home. There have been calls from more than one politician in the North East for a care summit to be held to bring together local authority and third sector providers to look at how these problems could be overcome. At the moment, the local authority has been resisting those calls. I hope they might reconsider, because I think that as we move forward with the 2020 vision, it's vitally important that everybody is working together to the common goal, which is to ensure that person-centred approach and to ensure that the individual is given the best possible care that can be provided. And I think that's why the advances in terms of digital health and e-health are important. They can assist in easing some of the pressures which exist on public bodies where there are current challenges, provided that all authorities sign up essentially to the technologies that are available. There's no reason why some of the difficulties that arise cannot be overcome. I recognise that that doesn't put carers into the house necessarily, but what it can do is overcome some of the difficulties which currently can exist. And that obviously requires better working across traditional silos. And I think that's why the passage of the Public Bodies Joint Working Bill was so important, because in some parts of the country, when I was on the Health Committee, we heard evidence that showed that there was fantastic working between health and social care services. But in other areas we heard evidence, and we would all be able to cite anecdotal evidence of where that joint working doesn't always happen and where there are gaps that exist. And I think what we need to ensure is that closer working together so that patients receive better outcomes and that patients don't find themselves falling into the gaps that can exist. And I think that the key thing to say in terms of the use of technology, often the idea is held up that the use of technology is there to replace things that are happening in the health service. I think what's quite clear is that what we're looking to do is augment and support the work that is done in the health service, not necessarily to replace it, but to make it more efficient and to ensure that the time of the NHS is spent more efficiently and people are not having to find themselves in a healthcare setting for longer than they necessarily need to be. And I note the work that's being done by, for example, NHS Research Scotland in terms of contributing towards the life sciences sector in Scotland. Life sciences has a very strong foothold in Aberdeen, and indeed I've met with a number of life sciences companies within my constituency and have seen some of the great work that's being done firsthand. And I think the work of NRS and its strategic direction I think will help that sector. I recognise that there are challenges in the sector in terms of attracting talent, in terms of ensuring that companies who can locate in Scotland are able to do so. But I know that there is a lot of good work being done in that area to try and get more companies to come and view Scotland as an opportunity. Indeed, I note that the recent announcement of 4 health boards becoming Pfizer Inspire sites, which will see them become one of the company Pfizer's preferred international sites for future research studies. That is a positive development which I hope can be built upon. I also note some innovations taking place in the Grampian area, including a look at whether or not the provision of iPads and tablets to community midwives might assist in the work that they're doing and also assist the experience for the patient as well. I think that one of the things which intrigued me, and I saw a report from the Digital Health Institute, was around the Future Ambulance project. And I was looking at that, where the shift in service demand for ambulance services from emergency to a more primary community and social care service function has seen them look at how they develop ambulance services going forward. And I think that's something which I would be very interested to see the outcome of. Also the fact that it could be transferable, which is one of the key things about a lot of the technologies here, is that they are transferable not just within a healthcare setting but to other sectors. I thought Hugh Henry's call was a good one in terms of leaving party politics to the side. And I think one of the things that we have to be very cautious on, Presiding Officer, is that as healthcare evolves, there will be the same evolution in terms of the way that healthcare is structured and delivered. And what we must avoid is the kind of knee-jerk reaction that can sometimes come from that, to say that because there has been a change in this area, it is bad, without looking at where that change has gone, what has taken place elsewhere, and how that is improving the service. So I think if we can agree that we're going to leave the party politics to the side, then we can move forward with the 2020 vision on a much more collaborative basis.
Thank you very much. Now call Duncan McNeill, to be followed by Bob Doris.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And like Richard Simpson and others, I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's statement and his vision to create a digital transformation on the health service, and we wish him well in that. We also welcome some restoration of the IT budget and the financial monies that he announced today. And while we all can get excited about technology, I think it has been useful today to focus on digital to lead to some of the other more fundamental issues behind this. But we should keep in mind, I think, and it has been alluded to, about the introduction of technology as it positively impacts on patients, as we've heard in diabetes and others. And look at that in another way in terms of a mobile phone for care workers, which makes it even more possible to deliver a 10-minute or a 15-minute visit, and increases the pressure on that person to get in and out of there as quickly as possible. So technology is exciting, it's great, it has the possibilities to innovate and change and support change, but patient outcomes, I think, are all important. I'm pleased to be taking part in this progress debate and on the 2020 vision. And across political parties, I think we all accept that, broadly support that and know that we need to make progress there. But vision without action, as has been said by no less than Nelson Mandela, is just a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. This applies to digital as well as all the other issues on the route map. We can have this debate about digital innovation here today, and it allows us to explore these issues without too much political knockabout. But we could have discussed safe care, patient-centred care, on-schedule emergency care, and all of these other much more difficult issues that are presenting us with problems. And I think Stuart Stevenson, who's left the chamber, says that change comes with risk. That not only applies, I think, to digital change and innovation, but applies to change of the service. And we know that vision with action can change the NHS in Scotland. We know it can. Action in the three big killers in Scotland, taken in the early years of this Parliament, has significantly reduced mortality. We know that. We know that that change worked when we got together and made that change happen. And people in my constituency across Scotland are alive today as a result of that action. That was a priority. It was set above all else in the early days. And we know, again, that the great public health measure of banning smoking in public places has significantly changed individuals' lives and indeed the wider society in Scotland. So the question now, I think, with the challenges that we face, can we achieve comparable and significant change within the health service? And we have had that, and we don't want to dwell on it. It's been said time and time again. We've had the Audit Scotland, Amber Warnings, the BMA, the RCN and many others, and indeed our own personal experience about the reputational risk and damage that's been done and how we look after our elderly in the community and indeed in hospitals. And time after time we see the inspection reports confirming the repeated mistakes and whatever. So we need to step up to the challenge. And there are many distractions. There are no doubt there are many distractions where the government is forced to react to a situation rather than trying to prevent that situation. If we look at the money that flows in after a crisis on A&E waits, or a big campaign on rare diseases, or indeed prescribing for end-of-life medicines, and we are chasing that. And I think we've got to guard against that. We've got to address all of these issues. We've got to guard against it if we are determined to change the health service for the better here in Scotland. And I think that's where I reflect on Hugh Henry's remarks about, what can we actually come together and change to do that in a non-political way. We have got, as Chuck Brodie said, the focus on inputs but not necessarily the outputs. We are too focused maybe on the clinical workforce rather than the community workforce of the future. And these are difficult issues. I remember in this Parliament there were campaigns, there was a riot in Aberdeen about the absence of a dentist, or not being able to get a dentist. You know, we're talking now we can't get people to look after the elderly, we can't get the care workers because we don't value them the same as we do the clinical workforce. I support Richard Simpson's and Labour's call for an independent review. In many ways, the review would give the politicians the space. The NHS is too important just to simply leave to the political debate. We need to let some air in here, refocus, and actually I have a vision that we could actually have a joint manifestos based on all that we agree on about change in 2016. Rather than it being a dividing line in 2016, we could be taking a vision of a new National Health Service in Scotland. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I call on Bob Doris to be followed by Richard Lyle.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. As Aileen MacLeod said earlier, we recently passed the Public Bodies Bill, now Act, in this chamber. That will integrate health and social care services for adults. It takes a permissive view, however, of further integration, and in terms of our 2020 vision, I suggest housing is of particular importance with looking at using telehealth and new technologies more generally. Indeed, social landlords are a key part of that solution when seeking to support adults, as the motion says that we have before us, at home or in a homely setting, or indeed to help reduce hospital readmissions, again an aspiration of the Scottish Government in the motion before us and in relation to that 2020 vision. I'd like to talk a little bit about the work of a social landlord in communities that I represent. NG Homes in North Glasgow are already actively involved in keeping the wider community healthier more generally. They have appointed a sports coordinator, part funded by the Winning Foundation, focused on helping the local community to be active and to stay active. This North Glasgow Sports Legacy project has promoted many activities including football, athletics, table tennis, rugby, biking, cricket and basketball. Hundreds of young people, admittedly, have already benefited. Tackling physical inactivity and also promoting physical literacy is vital in ensuring that our next generation are as healthy and active as they can be. That generation should, we would all hope, be well placed, be far better placed to be fit and healthy at home and happy for longer. So I mention that in relation to the preventative aspect of everything we're talking about this afternoon. It's not just a matter of waiting till people get old and have to be sustained at home. It's about a quality of life, not just sustaining people at home. So what about the current generation of older people? Well, you know, the Housing Association I referred to does a range of activities, as others do across the country, in keeping older people healthy and active, but they're also very, very keen to explore the use of new technologies to support tenants. And suggestions that I've heard in the past have included the use of, for example, perhaps in the future, smart televisions in the home of every older person, and perhaps even the possibility of bespoke apps developed for these smart televisions. I can see a clear connectivity with telehealth in relation to the development of that. So, for example, Presiding Officer, perhaps in the future an app can connect to older residents with their housing officers at home or the janitorial staff at home, but also perhaps the same television, the same apps can promote contact with healthcare workers at home or allied health professionals. We've heard earlier on about home helps and 10-15-minute care visits, but building up that relationship with individuals who still come into their home face to face. I'd like to stress that none of this is supposed to be a replacement to face-to-face visits. It's to complement face-to-face visits and to support people to be happy and content at home. Now, I've mentioned the social rented sector, but many, many more people, of course, are staying in the private rented sector in old age as well. So that has to be considered. And, of course, those who are in their own owner-occupied accommodation. I think it's important that when we look at the technologies at home, be it the social rented sector, private rented or owner-occupier, that we make sure when it's developed and brought into people's housing that it's done in a coordinated way. So first of all, there's no point in having one part of the country and one initiative using one form of technology which is not able to complement another good initiative in another part of the country. We have to make sure the systems speak to each other and it's done in a coordinated way. But also we have to make sure it's not technology for technology's sake. So it's not just about using the possibility of smart televisions and the apps, it's about what that's used for. Who's better placed to decide what that could be used for in people's homes than much of the third sector, who should be involved in the co-production of services at a very local level? So yes, we can have the technology, but it's what the tasks that technology is aimed to do. So can we just make sure that when we develop technologies to support people in their tenancies, in their homes, that we make sure that it's a product, a service that people want? And I think the third sector have got a very important role to play in that. And the time I've got left, Presiding Officer, maybe just say a little bit about how e-health could be used to provide peer support for people who are housebound and have similar conditions, who can't get to conventional support groups across the country. Indeed, people with orphan and ultra-orphan conditions, something I know the Cabinet Secretary has been very involved in. If there only are 7 or 8 people in Scotland, or 20 or 30 in the whole of the UK with the same condition as you, how on earth are you supposed to meet up and talk to them? E-health may have a role to play in relation to that. I think the final point I would say, and it's another issue I've been working on, which isn't really e-health, but it's about supporting people to be at home, but to promote activity to get them out of their houses and a productive and active life as well, not just stay in their houses. And I've been doing a lot of work with continence nurse specialists in Glasgow about the services that they are seeking to promote, and that can really be a housebound situation for many, many people, which can impact on their mental health. It can impact on their balance with gait syndrome, and it can impact in a variety of different ways. And I just put that on the record because it's something I'm involved in. It's not just about supporting people in their homes, but to be happy and active in their homes, but to get out as part of the wider community also.
Many thanks. Now call on Richard Lyle to be followed by David Stewart. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'll try to stay within the 6 minutes. Firstly, can I say it's very nice to see Dr Richard Simpson back leading for Labour in this debate. The Scottish Government's 2020 vision has been outlined here today already. I feel confident that because of this vision, everyone in Scotland will be able to live longer, healthier lives at home, live in a homely setting where they feel comfortable, where we'll have a healthcare system which I believe is second to none, where we will have an integrated health and social care. There is rightly a focus on prevention, anticipation and supporting self-management. Where hospital treatment cannot be avoided, day case treatment will be the norm. Despite all the changes and technical advances, and no matter what the setting, care will be delivered to the highest standards, and patients should always be at the centre of all decisions to meet their individual needs and requirements. I am confident this is achievable because we are already one of the front-runners in e-health. Indeed, Scotland has recently been referred to as the European leader in taking forward e-health programmes. Indeed, in one such programme, Smart Care, which has been piloted in my own region in North Lanarkshire, along with other areas in Scotland, and also other countries, including Italy, Denmark and Spain. Smart Care began in March 2013 and is being jointly funded by the European Commission. And I know that the Scottish Government aims to use technology to support the delivery of integrated services across health and social care. Scotland in particular is looking at best practices, pathways to prevent and manage our responses to falls, management and prevention. It is projected that this pilot, if rolled out, will impact on many thousands of patients across Scotland, including in the Lanarkshire area, as already stated in my region. £770 million already has been invested in e-health strategy to date. Due to this investment, Scotland has electronic patient records in both primary and secondary care throughout the country, and e-prescribing is widely used, and patient ordering of repeat prescriptions is available in many, if not all, practices. By increasing the use of e-health technology, it will help the delivery of the 2020 vision in a number of ways, such as electronic access to services, for example booking and cancelling appointments online, electronic patient access to their own health information, electronic access to information about local services and specialist health information. The introduction of e-health has delivered the core infrastructure to support the reduction of paperwork and move to electronic records management across the NHS. Scotland is again showing its innovation by launching the Digital Health Institute in 2013. This partnership between healthcare providers and industry and academia will create the next generation of technology. The Digital Health Institute will help drive growth and innovation in Scotland, and the potential market opportunity for Scotland will be up to £1 billion per annum. Our strong reputation in digital health has attracted major international companies to engage with NHS Scotland, which in turn has increased the opportunities for Scotland to influence and get early benefits from new technologies and applications. In this light, it was announced on the 7th of February 2013 that a Lanarkshire-based life science company and Dundee University researchers have won a major European-wide drug discovery contract. This is the biggest investment of its kind in Scotland from the European Innovation Medicines Initiative. Industry experts at BioCity Scotland in my region at Newhouse are working with Dundee University scientists on a £100 million international project researching new drug treatments. This facility puts not only Scotland but Lanarkshire at the heart of international drug discovery. The SNP vision for the NHS, as stated before, is that the Scottish NHS should remain a publicly delivered service and not blindly follow the privatisation agenda of the condemned parties in Westminster. And sorry for the pop, but I just couldn't go past without saying it. In order to facilitate this, this SNP government has met its commitment to protect the NHS budget. The health resource budget will be a record £11.8 billion by 2015-16. This reflects a real terms increase of over £161 million. This is in line with our belief that the NHS in Scotland should not be privatised. Can I, in finishing, Presiding Officer, compliment the Cabinet Secretary, Alec Neil, for his drive and commitment to Scotland's NHS and welcome the £10 million project announced today, and I will be supporting the motion tonight. Thank you.
Many thanks. And I now call on David Stewart to be followed by George Adam. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to debate the 2020 vision for health in Scotland, particularly the emphasis on innovation through technology and digital health and care. And as co-chair of the cross-party group on diabetes, along with Annette Milne, it is no surprise that my focus today will be on diabetes, specifically insulin pumps and research around the artificial use of pancreas. I will also be providing evidence of why I believe the Scottish Government should provide some immediate and independent review of the NHS. I was going to ask the Cabinet Secretary in his wind-up, unfortunately he's not in his place, but I would make the general point, Presiding Officer, that links between business and education are absolutely vital to develop this innovation. And one example I would give is the link between LifeScan in Inverness and UHI, where they have funded a professor of diabetic care. A few short months ago, Presiding Officer, I strolled through the Melbourne summer sun from my hotel in the Victorian State Parliament House. I was due to speak at a very unusual conference. It was nearly 100 champions for diabetes from as far afield as Russia, Ukraine, Nigeria, Canada, and from South Africa we even had their First Lady. All of these people were elected members, all were advocates for diabetes, and all represented their own countries. The conference concluded with the signing of the Melbourne Declaration, which I have spoken in Parliament about previously, which committed parliaments across the globe to ensure that diabetes is high on their own political agenda. Now, that declaration is very important for today's debate. It calls on nations to have a higher emphasis on preventative work, early diagnosis, management and access to adequate care, and ensure treatment and medicines, including, of course, digital health initiatives, are available for those living with diabetes. Now, Presiding Officer, I was proud to talk to the conference delegates about Scotland, but also about issues of international significance for diabetes. And I am still proud to come from a nation with a strong track record in innovation and discovery. I mean, we all know, of course, we've got Scots in our history, like Alexander Fleming, who discovered penicillin, Scots like James Watt, who discovered the steam engine, and Scots like Alexander Graham Bell, who discovered the telephone. But international collaboration is where real strides can be made. And in 1922, Professor John MacLeod from Aberdeen, working with two other outstanding scientists, Dr. Banting and Charles Best, discovered insulin. Now, MacLeod and Banting won a Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1923, shared with Charles Best. That discovery in the 1920s was a real step change. It's equivalent today to the digital health revolution we are having. Last time I asked a parliamentary question, Presiding Officer, to the Health Minister, I was told that there's around 250,000 people who are diabetic in Scotland, but a further staggering 620,000 who are at high risk of developing type 2. And in addition, 49,000 people have the condition but are undiagnosed in Scotland. So that means there's approximately 1 million people in Scotland who are directly affected by diabetes through having it or being at high risk of developing it. But I would concede, Presiding Officer, there has been some strong positive steps in care for people with diabetes. Digital information is vital, but the provision of insulin pumps to those of under 18s, I believe, is very, very important indeed. But the number of people with the condition is rising, which will have a serious effect on Scotland's immediate future. But with the Melbourne Declaration on Diabetes focused on prevention of diabetes, the Scottish Government must have a focus on the condition that properly reflects the size of the problem. I'd like to give one example of innovation through technology. Diabetes UK is funding 2 groundbreaking research projects to develop and test artificial pancreas to use with adults with type 1 diabetes. The artificial nature of this is a system which measures blood glucose levels on a minute-to-minute basis using a continuous glucose monitor, and that transmits that information to an insulin pump that calculates and releases the required amount of insulin into the body. This device is one example of the way we can transform lives, particularly for people who find it difficult to maintain good blood glucose control. Let me give you an example. Mark Wareham comes from Cambridge. He's got type 1 diabetes and has had it for 27 years. He normally uses an insulin pump to control his condition. He took back in the trial earlier this year. And he said, and I quote, Presiding Officer, "I'm so glad I took part in this trial, as I didn't think I would have believed what a positive outcome the artificial pancreas has done. I believe that people with type 1 diabetes should use this fantastic facility. I feel fantastic. My energy levels were through the roof." Unquote. My final section, Presiding Officer, is I want to focus on why I believe an independent review of the NHS would have for those who are at risk of diabetes. So how can the Scottish Government's 2020 vision deliver for people with diabetes? I have just a couple of points for the Cabinet Secretary, Presiding Officer. First point is we need to focus on finding the undiagnosed through screening for type 2 diabetes. I believe we need to target those overweight, those over 45 and those with a family history. Secondly, we need to look at the Scottish Diabetes Action Plan. It needs to be reviewed and a proactive agenda for the future developed. And awareness needs to be raised on the signs and symptoms of type 1 to patients, carers and health professionals through the Diabetes UK's 4 Ts to ensure in future that children are diagnosed before an emergency. And in final 2 seconds, Presiding Officer, I'd like to say the key point is that diabetes has huge issues for the health of individuals in Scotland. It's the main cause of blindness to people of working age and the main contributor to kidney failure, amputation and cardiovascular disease. In conclusion, I believe we have a great opportunity in Scotland to raise the bar in healthcare through innovation in technology. Scotland is one of the highest incidences of type 2 in the world. It's time we tackled that ticking time bomb. Not only would it be cost effective, it would on an individual scale tackle a condition that blinds, maims and kills.
Many thanks. Now call on George Adam, after which we'll move to closing speeches.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome this debate and the Scottish Government's vision for delivery by 2020. And also, I welcome the tone of this debate because I think it's important that we get that correct. And Hugh Henry, Presiding Officer, you're going to hear something that probably hasn't been heard in 20 years we've known each other. He is correct when he says that we have to get beyond the politics in an issue like this and we have to get down to the actual how do we deliver and how can we make that difference. And the Cabinet Secretary is right. Technology is an enabler It's something to help. It's not something instead of. It's part of the solution. It's the basket of measures that can help people that are dealing with issues in their life and dealing with the NHS. And it's making things a lot easier with the interaction with the NHS. I welcome the £10 million support and expansion of health technology that was announced today by the Cabinet Secretary. And I particularly welcome the Cabinet Secretary's personalised patient record, because that gives, as he says, gives empowerment of using technology to access health professionals, ensure that help people living with long-term conditions. And I'll do what Dave Stewart did during his speech and say I am the convener of the cross-party group in multiple sclerosis, and since my wife has MS, I'm aware of the situation and the difficulties that people can have with managing their condition. And one of the situations that we had at our very first meeting was the access to information and be able to go to health professionals and get further information. And I think this type of technology, this type of opportunity would make things a lot better for people dealing with long-term conditions like MS. Because one of the things that was constantly mentioned was just that opportunity. Instead of having to phone up and see the doctor every 2 or 3 weeks like my wife does currently, Presiding Officer, there's a good chance that she would be able to actually access information and find out things that could help and make a difference without, and yes, it's regarding the cost as well, it'll probably be cheaper, but more importantly, the information allowed and able to get, and I would assume access 24/7 through the actual computer system as well. That would make a massive difference to people dealing with that as well. And it's a constant interaction with health professionals that can make a difference with people in that kind of condition, dealing with these conditions. But the route map describes 12 priority areas for action, and the vision for high-quality, sustainable health and social care services in Scotland is the 3 domains of quality of care, health of population and value and financial sustainability. And some of the information that's in one of the reports that I just picked up at the back, I think it does actually answer the document itself, some of the questions that the opposition have asked. You know, value and financial stability. We've got to make sure that it's an effective resource. It says every resource that's there has to be an effective resource, and one of the main aims is the quality of outcomes. And I think that answers a lot of some of the things that the opposition members have brought up already, and quite rightly asked these questions. I would like to say part of this as well is the quality of care, independent living. And I think Bob Doris brought up a very important issue when he actually said it's about the quality of life as well, making sure that everyone that's dealing with this, it's not just a case of getting this service at home, it's also the quality of the service and the quality of life that they have. Like some of my colleagues, I welcomed the Digital Health Institute creation, and also I would like to say, like Mark MacDonald, the one that caught my eye was the future ambulance service, was the fact that they're effectively looking for a way that they can look at new technology, how the ambulance service can actually be for the future, for now, and what technology that we could actually use, plug and play, and use in various other actual kind of blue light services like the police, like the fire service. You know, these are all things that I remember as my time as a councillor, that they all had different systems, and I think it's important that a place like the Digital Health Institute can actually push us down the right direction and ensuring that this technology in the future can be used by everyone and make sure that we can get everything sorted out. So effectively, that's one of the things that I found quite positive. Telehealth and telecare has been mentioned, and there's been quite a lot of programmes already done with regards to this, but I will bring up the fact that in Renfrewshire the technology has already been delivered to patients in Scotland. I know that Mr Henry mentioned that he was unaware of that actually happening in Renfrewshire, but I think you only have to say that when I was a councillor there, we could see that patients with dementia actually, this was a start, we started going down this route. And again, it wasn't just the case of ensuring that we could have a situation where it was a cheaper way to deliver service, it was the quality of service and making sure it works. And perhaps Mr Henry is correct that there should maybe be a way that we can change some of these things as well. You know, but they've actually found out that when they've had this, the self-reported outcomes provided by Renfrewshire Partnership, it gave estimated net savings attributed to 325 clients with dementia over a 5-year period and a saving of over 2.8 million, equivalent to 8,650 per client with dementia receiving telecare and delivering for families and making lives better. And I think that's the most important part of it. It's making lives better for families that are dealing with conditions like this, and making sure that we can get all this technology to work and make a difference in their life. So I would say in closing, Presiding Officer, I welcome much of what's been said during this debate. I do believe that some of the things that are in the document actually answer a lot of the issues that the opposition members have brought up. But I think it's a case of we need to continue down this road to ensure that we can deliver all we can for the people in Scotland with the NHS in 2020.
Excellent. Many thanks. And we now move to the closing speeches. Call on Jim Hume. 6 minutes, please, to wind up.
Thanks, Deputy Presiding Officer. Again, I believe we've had a consensual debate, more or less, around many issues in our health service today. I welcome the commitment to at the latest, have personal electric health records for patients, and of course the 10 million for the home health monitoring scheme, and the commitment from the Minister regarding part of my amendment regarding ward view and the likes. Labour's amendment again has been looking for a full and independent review of the NHS to identify pressure points. I don't disagree that there are pressure points. We have postcode lottery for access to psychologists, the number of bed days occupied by delayed discharge patients increasing to 135,000 in the last quarter of last year, 774 A&E staff being attacked while trying to go about their work in the last 2 years, patients waiting over 20 hours in A&E before being admitted, and of course the disparity that exists across the country for the treatment of certain cancer types, which is unacceptable. So it's incumbent upon boards to conceive a strategy to overcome these difficulties, and when they are struggling, it is of course the responsibility of the Cabinet Secretary to step in and resolve it effectively. Situation when we had in NHS Grampian and the oncologists, knocking on effects to patients in Orkney and Shetland simply can't be allowed to happen. But we know all of this and more. We don't need the NHS to go on hold whilst a full review is undertaken. We need the Cabinet Secretary to act on these matters now. So unfortunately we won't be supporting the Labour amendment this evening because of that, but do of course press the Government as ever to act on the pressure points that we know exist, and do so as a matter of urgency. In my opening remarks and amendment, I mentioned in particular the innovative control system that has been pioneered by NHS Borders, an impressive tool and one with huge potential. On my visit there, it was clear the enthusiasm by the staff for that programme. It aided all the clinical staff and will even help with catering and transport in and out of hospital, potentially as far out as health visitors too. And that's important. No change of system will work without buy-in from staff, and you will get buy-in when you make the system user-friendly and appropriate to the complicated and multifaceted tasks that our NHS staff have to work with and work very well with. But any digital innovation must be person-centred. We know that the number of bed days occupied by delayed discharge patients in the last quarter of last year has increased to 135,000. Patients ready to go home can't, so due to being able to get a place in a care home or simply to find a way for them to be transported home. So that's a huge distress for those patients. It's also a drain on NHS resource and of course blocks the beds for those who need to be admitted. And there's a change of course in our demographics. We're all part of an ageing population. 73% of total bed days are occupied by patients over 75. And this of course is forecast to grow, which will mean people living longer, which is good, and living longer with ailments too. Now, I'm not saying that this can be fixed overnight, but there are now some quite low-hanging fruits here, I believe. And ward view is proven already to help patient flow management and hence bed blocking. It's flexible enough and can be used portably, potentially in all corners of Scotland, so that would help to address the points made well by Richard Simpson and Annette Milne, where they've moved from one health board area to another. And with its real-time information and updating of estimated discharge date, the information transfers seamlessly with the patient and is known to assist in the reduction of length of stay. That to me is a low-hanging fruit. But it needs to be pushed as well as more use of the likes of, as mentioned by Stuart Stevenson, Skype. I don't know if we should be advertising companies, so
basically voice over internet protocol, which is the correct way, and to discuss about Skype. Stuart Stevenson also mentioned about how you should have two phases when you're introducing matters, and I would take it slightly further than that. When I was with the NHS, they talked about PDSA, which is plan, do, study, then act, then plan, do, study and act, so you are continually learning, rather than, oh, we tried that, it didn't work, so let's forget it, let's go back to the old chalkboards. So plan, do, study, act, plan, do, study, act. I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary has got that implanted in his mind now. Also, some other innovations have been with texting for use for appointments from NHS departments for reminders, reappointments, and so that patients can also book or cancel their appointments. We've all got that technology in our pockets now. It's quite old technology, but it's available to most. I believe this government needs to prioritise the rollout of telehealth. I've welcomed the Minister's remarks today to a national scale. I believe that to do so, we do now need to establish a heat target for health boards, as my amendment states, putting patients first by mainstreaming telehealth care throughout Scotland. It's a challenge, I know, for the Cabinet Secretary, but a chance for him to prove that he has the mettle to deliver quickly on a much-needed improvement in the way our health service works. Many thanks. Now, Colin Jackson-Carlaw, 6 minutes, please.
Presiding officer, I actually begin with a question for you. It's a rhetorical question, so don't panic. You don't have to answer it. But can you remember the actress Janet Webb? Actually, members of a certain age in the chamber will know who Janet Webb was, for she was the woman who used to burst on at the end of the Morecambe and Wise show and say, "Thank you all for watching me and my little show here tonight. If you've enjoyed it, then it's all been worthwhile. Good night, and I love you all." I say that because that was very much the Cabinet Secretary's modus operandi, I thought, during the course of his speech this afternoon. And what a difference a fortnight makes in terms of the conduct of a debate on the future of Scotland's health service. And I think that may very well be in part due to the measured and thoughtful contribution from Dr Simpson. The Labour bull in the China shop was not with us this afternoon, but it was very welcome to hear Dr Simpson's contribution, which I thought, whilst being totally supportive of the general thrust of the terms of the government's motion, nonetheless remind us that this is a jigsaw, a very complicated jigsaw, in which all the various parts have to work. Now, I very much welcome the Cabinet Secretary's Janet Webb modus operandi this afternoon. Outside of the chamber, he has been a little bit florid in his rhetoric recently. Apparently it was Mrs Thatcher who introduced alcohol to Scotland, which was news to a great many people. And apparently there are thousands of civil servants down south teeming with rage to try and undermine the Scottish Health Service and rob us of all the consequentials, which I would just like to say to Mr Lyle, who was going on about the increase in health spending, that according to a response to a written question from the Cabinet Secretary, every penny of additional money in Scotland's health service between 2011 and 2016 is accounted for from consequentials coming from the Westminster Government. So I would hope he would be grateful for that support and not fall back on his traditional rhetoric. Now, this afternoon's debate, there were two contributions. I was very intrigued by what Malcolm Chisholm said, and also by Hugh Henry, who can have, in fact, I hope, amplified a point I tried to make in the last debate that we had here. And I make it again because Mr Brodie was another who referred to this, and that is that Scottish Conservatives are totally committed to a publicly funded, publicly owned health service in Scotland. There no longer is a ball to kick across the park here. The question is not whether or not we believe in that, but how we can collectively together work to make Scotland's health service the best that there can be. And on the sort of subject matter in hand today of new technology, frankly, as MSPs, we are a collection of atrophying old fogies when it comes to the subject. Any one of us with children, irrespective of their age, will recognise that the generation behind us doesn't even think about this now. They are totally embedded in its use, and not only its use, but their appreciation of its rapid change. And I think when we look back in maybe a decade, we will realise that we have gone through the biggest clinical, pharmaceutical and technological changes in the health service really of at any point in its history. And the change that represents is breathtaking. And I wonder at times, and I've questioned this before, whether in fact the current model we have of 14 health boards and 14 different ADCTs all prescribing and 14 different organisations that have to try and make all this technology work is in fact the model that is going to be appropriate as we go forward. And the reason I was focusing on what Malcolm Chisholm had to say is because I accept, with the benefit of hindsight, and I hope he might accept the corollary of this, that we did not in fact all embrace care in the way that perhaps we should have done at the time. And I wonder though whether in fact there was a sufficient consensus built behind care in order that we could. And when the Cabinet Secretary says he's going to invite all the political parties in for a giant powwow and chinwag to try and have a look to see whether we can't find common ground in the way that we move forward, building on, I think, Mr Henry's appeal, the important thing out of that is, if we accept that there is not a ball to kick across the park, that collectively we come forward with a structure going forward which in fact we can all sign up to and then collectively seek to make work. I wonder whether 2020 is relevant in some ways. We have a lot to do by 2020. But when I look at the way Greater Glasgow absorbed Clyde, that's nearly a decade. And only now are they actually, in that health board, beginning to think of some of the strategic change that needs to take place to complement the plan they already had for Glasgow within the Clyde aspect. And therefore, I think there is a 2025 and a 2030 vision that is going to have to be evolved, which is quite distinct from, I think, the pressure that we all understand. And I think, again, Mr Henry talked about the day-to-day politics, because clearly there are going to be occasions when we fall short of the immediate expectation that we have. Now, I thought Aileen MacLeod made a very non-partisan speech this afternoon. I was actually dazzled by all the acronyms and organisations to which she referred in Europe. But I thought it again emphasised the point that this is not either simply a Scottish appreciation of how healthcare is changing. It is an appreciation across a much wider world, and therefore, whether it be from England, whether it be from anywhere else, we have lessons that we have to learn and should be perfectly prepared to embrace to ensure that we achieve the outcome that we all want. I thought the spirit of this afternoon's debate may have lacked sparkle, but in its substance there was far greater cohesion and understanding and appreciation of what's necessary. And we, for one, will welcome the opportunity to participate with the Cabinet Secretary in the discussions he has suggested he would like to involve us in.
Dazzling. Thank you. Now call on Rhoda Grant. 8 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think there's been a great deal of consensus in today's debate, and I think Hugh Henry was right to point out that we're all committed to an NHS that delivers. So there is political consensus across the chamber. I think probably the only slight discord was whether indeed Margaret Thatcher had introduced us to alcohol, or, as I suspect, maybe drove most of us to drink, but I think we'll leave that for another day. I think
It is intriguing if you look at the graph that the deterioration in Scotland's alcohol consumption began almost the day she left office. Was that because Scotland was dancing in the streets, or was it because they were bereft at her loss? I leave that to you to decide.
I think we will all reach our own opinions on that, and I maybe shouldn't take up too much time on it, because I think we could debate it all day. What I think was clear from this afternoon's debate, and as Duncan McNeill said, we need a vision and we need action. And I think what was also clear was there is a joint vision for the NHS and what we want it to deliver. And indeed, in that very vein, the Cabinet Secretary invited us to a presentation on the 2020 vision, and I'm glad that he has done that. I hope he will listen to what we have to say, because I think it would be really important. And if we could maybe try and build that consensus around a joint vision that Duncan McNeill was saying, that we go into an election all with a shared vision of the NHS, that it no longer becomes a political issue but something we can unite around. I think that would be really helpful. But can I be quite clear and say that we believe we need a comprehensive review of the NHS to identify where the pressure points are in order to have that vision, in order to deliver that vision for the 21st century. And it's not just us that are saying this. We're not putting this forward on our own. It's the RCN, it's the BMA, it's the Patients Association, it's the Institute of Physiotherapists, it's many others who really want to see this vision developed in a way that's sustainable. It won't stop progress, but it will provide the action. We already share the vision, and I think we can agree on that, but we need the action, and we need to know where the pressure points are so we can unite and deal with those going into the future. The Cabinet Secretary also described how IT should be within the NHS, and I think sometimes he was talking about things that I think should have been mainstreamed but maybe haven't been, and that as well came out in the debate where people talked about good IT, good e-health care that was out there, but others were very clear that it wasn't happening in their communities. So we do have a very fragmented IT system. We need to pull that together so that all the systems speak to each other, and Bob Doris was talking about how that should happen at home, that when we're introducing IT to a patient's home, that we should make sure it will deal with other technologies and other services going into that home. We need that across the whole healthcare system, because even within hospitals we now have systems that don't speak to each other, and we have to depend on paper and indeed records, as Nanette was saying with her own appointment, where she couldn't be seen because her record was somewhere else. We talked about some of the money that has been spent on developing systems, some of them very good, but they haven't been taken up because there's not the culture and there's not the drive to use those new technologies. And some of them are very, very good, and I'll come to some of those in a short while. But we also need to look at those problems that are there, and I think it would be wrong not to highlight them today. For instance, the IT failures in Glasgow. You know, the report hasn't identified what happened. We need to find out what happened. We need to build resilience into the system, and other NHS boards need to learn from that. We also need to deal with the confidentiality issues around patients' records, and I very much welcome the announcement on the personalised patient record, but I think it's really important that confidentiality is built into that, and also ownership. Who owns the record? Is it the patient themselves that own the record? Do they have access to who is actually viewing that record? So that would cut out any confidentiality issue if they actually had access to who was seeing their record, because they would know if that was appropriate or not. So we need to look at all those issues. However, many members talked about the good examples. I mean, and I'm going to take liberty and mention Dr Gray's Hospital, Professor Grant Cumming, who is world-leading in some of his examples of using technology to give people information in a way that they can access when they need to access it, and I think it makes a big difference to patients' lives. Aileen McLeod talked about, the IT systems being in situ, but not always being used. And I think the only health board I have seen that uses things like video conferencing regularly and as part of their day-to-day work is Shetland. It's basic technology that could be used much more widely. And Stuart Stevenson also talked about access to broadband and to mobile connectivity. They're the very basics. If you're going to use those systems within people's houses, and indeed people in rural and remote communities have most to benefit because it saves them travelling if they can access health services more locally. However, those very people are the ones that are less likely to have access to broadband and mobile technology. And some of the solutions can be really simple if you use those technologies just to pass on information. Nanette mentioned a couple of really good examples, atrial fibrillation, and I'm really struggle with that word, so I'm quite glad I got it out. I think I was sympathising with the Cabinet Secretary earlier when you start using medical terminology. But I actually had an ECG taken on a smartphone as part of a meeting in the Parliament here, and it was quite a strange sensation to see your heart monitored on somebody's phone. But what a difference that could make if people were diagnosed that way. Also, optometry, again another name I'm struggling with. The developments in how they have sent records, screening to specialists have really helped the patient pathway. Some patients not having to visit a specialist at all because their records were seen and diagnosed, and others having very quick access to the help they need because of that. David Stewart, the Scottish Diabetes Champion, talked about the work of technology on insulin, and he's worked hard to have insulin pumps introduced more widely. But the real prize would be an artificial pancreas. What a difference that would make to people's lives, and I really hope that the studies carried out by Diabetes UK will actually bring that, because it will be absolutely life-changing. Others mentioned, Malcolm Chisholm-Chick-Brodie talked about monitoring movements at home, and that technology is there. Hugh Henry pointed out it's not always available to those who need it right here, right now. So I think we need to see how we roll out that technology to others. Again, Jim Hume used a great deal of his speech to talk about Wardview. Seemed like an excellent project. Again, why is that not going out? Self-management was something the Cabinet Secretary mentioned in his speech, and I was speaking about young people's transitions, young people with heart disease transitions. In Glasgow, where they are managed in York Hill, they self-manage. They're able to give themselves anticoagulants depending on the tests they take. When they move into the adult service, they're told that's no longer available to them, and they have to attend regular appointments in clinics. That is wrong. That's not self-management. It's actually taking and it's not a patient-centred approach. So I think we really need to look at how we deal with some of those cheaper and better options that are out there, but not being used properly. And I'm noticing I'm running out of time, Presiding Officer. So in conclusion, I'd say we just cannot ignore the challenges that face the health service now. Things like bed blocking, falling numbers of nurses, A&E pressures. I could go on, and many mentioned them. E-health and e-care can help build sustainability into the health service. But we need to heed calls for a review, build a health service that we will all be proud of and that we can unite around the way we have today.
Many thanks. I now call on Alec Neil to wind up the debate. 10 minutes or thereby, Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Presiding Officer. I agree with Jackson Carlaw. This has been a very good debate and a more mature debate than perhaps we've had in the past. And I actually think we owe it to everybody in Scotland, because everybody is a potential, if not an actual patient of the National Health Service in Scotland, that we do conduct ourselves more in this manner than has been the case sometimes in the past. And I think people want to see us working together to try to address the challenges in the National Health Service and indeed in the social care sector, rather than trying to always make political capital because 0.03% of the people at A&E have been in a trolley for more than 12 hours, which shouldn't happen, but nevertheless I think we've got to get things into perspective. Can I also say that I absolutely agree with Hugh Henry about the need for us to try to concentrate on what we agree on rather than focus on what we disagree on, because quite frankly I would say we all agree on, and I include the Scottish Conservative Party, we all agree probably on well over 95% of the points that are relevant about the future of the national health and social care sector in Scotland. And that is why I said that I would, and I've confirmed again today, and invitations will be going out, if not this week, certainly early next week, to invite representatives from all the parties across the chamber to have a discussion with us as the beginning of a process in terms of the 2020 vision and the route map to 2020. And what I want to see is a detailed plan being developed for 2020. And can I take up Jackson Carlaw's point? It's not just 2020, it's 2020 and beyond, because clearly we're not dealing with a situation that terminates in 2020. What we're doing is, and sometimes in health, particularly in terms of the application of technology, it can take a number of years before we get the structures in place to make it universal throughout the entire system. But I repeat that invitation, and that will be going out to representatives of all the parties in the Parliament. And the objective there, Presiding Officer, is to try to maximise the cooperation on the vision and plan for 2020 and beyond. Can I say, in relation to the amendments, the Government will be accepting the Liberal Democrat amendment, although I do want to qualify our acceptance, and that is to say that we first of all recognise the importance of heat targets, and we will give serious consideration to the call in the amendment to establish a heat target specifically in relation to telehealth. But as Jim Hume, I'm sure, will accept, that we don't just unilaterally make these decisions. We consult widely, as we will be doing when we set these heat targets over the coming months. But we will give serious consideration to that point, but I can't give a categorical commitment that we will include it, because at the end of the day it depends on wide-ranging stakeholder consultation. But we will be agreeing with the Liberal Democrat amendment. Can I say, and I say this genuinely regrettably, we won't be voting for the Labour amendment, and for exactly the same reasons as explained as to why the Conservatives and the Liberals won't be supporting the Labour amendment, and that is in relation to the issue of the review. The review remit is to identify pressure points. Can I say, and I say this in a positive tone and a friendly tone, we actually know the pressure points. There is no new discovery to be made about the pressure points in the National Health Service in Scotland. I could stand here and make a speech about the pressure points both in health and in social care in Scotland. So what I believe is that we should move on from that and put a plan in place, a business plan, an action plan in place to deal, amongst other things, with what we do about the pressure points and get the pressure points sorted, rather than spend time trying to identify what we already know. Indeed, in this chamber, Richard Simpson in particular has been very articulate in highlighting a number of the pressure points in the health and social care sector in Scotland. And that's why we don't think it is a review that's needed. What we need to do is to put an action plan in place that actually deals with the pressure points.
Rhoda Grant. I appreciate what the Cabinet Secretary is saying, but it is the staff working within the Health Service who believe the review would be very helpful. We see the outcome of the pressure points because they appear in statistics and A&E waiting times and all those problems. Do we know what is causing that? Do we really need to we may need a review to go into the very causes of that, and sometimes it might be something some distance away, and I think that's why the staff are very keen that that review should be held.
Cabinet Secretary. I would say, Presiding Officer, we have as much analysis of the pressure points as one could ever get, and the staff I speak to really want a plan to rectify the challenges, to face up to the challenges of the pressure points, and therefore, while I agree with everything else that's in the Labour motion, unfortunately because of that, I can't recommend that we vote for it tonight. But I do reiterate that we invite all the parties in to put a plan in place, amongst other things, to deal with the pressure points and make sure there are no longer pressure points in the future, as much as we possibly can do that. Can I also say that I do particularly recognise the points made about social care, and again highlighted by Hugh Henry. I do believe there are pressure points in the social care system that need to be addressed, and a number of them will need to be addressed sooner rather than later. And we are working with our friends in COSLA and Solace and elsewhere precisely on these points. And we do recognise, particularly when it comes to care home provision in Scotland, we need a different approach to the system we have at the present time. But it's not just about care home provision. And can I say, one of the pressure points at the moment is that there are 57 care homes in Scotland where the Care Inspectorate has currently got a moratorium on new admissions because of the poor quality or insufficiently good quality in these care homes, and that has actually taken nearly 800 beds out of the system at the present time, which is a contributing factor, not the only one, but a contributing factor to the recent increases in delayed discharges. But we are working through those issues. In Aberdeen, for example, and I can say to Mark MacDonald, in Aberdeen there's actually a meeting this week between the Health Board and the local authority in the city, because if you look at the Grampian figures, the pressure is not in the rural area, the pressure is very much in Aberdeen City. Can I also say that in terms of some of the other issues raised, Richard Simpson, specifically on telehealth and e-health, raised a number of issues, quite a long list of issues. I will write to him on all of those, because there are a number of issues in which perhaps he's not as up to date as he could be when I write to him, and I'm happy to place that letter in Spice so that everybody is up to date and we respond to the very specific issues he raised in relation to different aspects of IT and e-health. And let me say, I hear what people are saying about the issue of fragmentation. I do think the time has come to just not concentrate on pilots, but actually to be rolling out the successful pilots across the country. That's why I've announced £10 million today to roll out projects like the Girvan project or the Dunmellington project, like Hospital at Home, which has got a large e-health element within it, because these pilots have proven to be very successful. In nearly every single case, they have reduced the rate of hospitalisation by up to 70%. And if I was asked to see what is overall, in the great scheme of things, in the health and social care sector in Scotland, I would say reducing the level of hospitalisation that can be avoided is my #1 priority. The NHS Lanarkshire report published just before Christmas indicated that up to 30% of the people in hospital in Lanarkshire actually didn't need to be there. And that's without the impact of programmes like the Dunmellington Girvan type project, the telehealth projects. These are people who, for various reasons, have been admitted to hospital, but even in today's world, shouldn't actually be there. And if there's a common theme running through the 2020 vision, it is that hospitals should be a last resort and not a first resort in terms of modern healthcare in Scotland. And I think we would all sign up to that, because that is the right way to go. But I do accept the issue that we've still got too much fragmentation in terms of too many pilots, perhaps, and not enough national rollout at pace and at scale. And that's precisely one of the agenda items we discussed at the e-health summit yesterday, and in which we will be putting forward an action plan. Can I also particularly deal with the points raised by David Stewart, who of course is a well-known champion
Can you
on
respond
the
briefly, Cabinet Secretary?
diabetes issue. Just to say that we are very cognisant of the points he raises, and again we will be taking action on these points. Unfortunately, I don't have time to explain in detail all the action we'll be taking, but again I will write to David Stewart just to update him on the initiatives we're taking. Presiding Officer, I think this has been a very good, mature debate. I think we've got broad consensus on the way forward, and I look forward to hosting the representatives of all the other parties in the Chamber for the presentation on what we're planning in terms of 2020, and to receive and consider seriously their ideas and their input, so that when we do produce a detailed action plan for 2020, it will enjoy, hopefully, the total support of the Parliament. Thank you.
That concludes the debate on update on delivering the 2020 vision in NHS Scotland. We now move to the next item of business, which is a consideration of business motion 9226 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme. Any member who wishes to speak against the motion should press the request to speak button now, and I call on Joe Fitzpatrick to move motion number 9226.
Moved.
No member is asked to speak against the motion, therefore I now put the question to the Chamber. The question is that motion number 9226 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed to. The next item of business is consideration of a Parliamentary Bureau motion. I'd ask Joe Fitzpatrick to move motion number 9227 on the referral of the draft Local Government Finance Scotland Amendment Order 2014 to the Parliament.
Moved.
Question on this motion will be put at decision time, to which we now come. There are 4 questions to be put as a result of today's business. The first question is amendment number 9222.2 in the name of Richard Simpson, which seeks to amend motion number 9222 in the name of Alex Neil on an update on delivering the 2020 vision in NHS Scotland be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. The Parliament is not agreed. We move to a vote. Members should cast their votes now.
The result of the vote on amendment number 9222.2 in the name of Richard Simpson is as follows. Yes, 32. No, 70. There were 14 abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed to. The next question is amendment number 9222.1 in the name of Jim Hume, which seeks to amend motion number 9222 in the name of Alex Neil on the 2020 vision in NHS Scotland be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The amendment is therefore agreed to. The next question is that motion number 9222 in the name of Alex Neil as amended on the 2020 vision in NHS Scotland be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed to. The next question is that motion number 9227 in the name of Joe Fitzpatrick on the referral of the draft Local Government Finance Scotland Amendment Order 2014 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed to. That concludes decision time. We now move to members' business. Members who are leaving the chamber should do so quickly and quietly.